On Monday, I was over at Walmart at Pittsburgh Mills. Walmart was very, very busy that day, and when I got to the checkout counter, they were full. There were lines in every one of those aisles. And I made the mistake of picking the wrong aisle. So I picked this aisle, and these two ladies in front of me, they're having a lively conversation, and they were really talking at the top of their voice. I thought to myself, I'm going to try not to listen, but it sounded very interesting, so I thought, well, I'm going to listen. And they were talking about Thanksgiving and Christmas. And they were talking about not who they're going to invite to the dinner table for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but who they are not going to invite. And the one lady said to the other lady, I'd like to invite my son, but I cannot invite my son because he's going to bring his wife. And you put my son's wife and myself in a room together for 5 minutes, there's a fight. So I can't invite him because he's going to bring her. The other lady responded by saying something very interesting. She said, well, the same thing is true in my life, in my family. I can't invite my sister because my sister is going to bring her husband. And her husband is extremely sensitive. No matter what you say is wrong. He'll take you to task for just about everything you say, and when he walks into the house, a blanket of tension just falls over the entire house. I'd love to invite my sister, but she's going to bring her husband, and I can't invite her because I don't want him. And I was thinking as they were talking about who they're not going to invite, I thought to myself, isn't that unfortunate? Because Thanksgiving and Christmas should be a time of memory making with your families, a time of joy and happiness. But for them, it's going to be just another nightmare if any one of those show up. When I got in my car after I was leaving Walmart, I was thinking back when I was a young guy. I was probably 12 years old. There's a very interesting song I was learning on the guitar. It was called War. It was written by Edwin Starr. Now, the great thing about this song when you're learning how to play guitar, which I was at that time, it had a total of 26 chord changes. So it was a great song to learn chord changes on a guitar because it moved pretty fast. In later years, I would look back to see what the lyrics of the song were. And it turned out to be the lyrics of that song. You might remember this, especially if you're near my age. The lyrics to that song are powerful. I'm just going to give you a little smattering of the lyrics themselves. The lyric says this: war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. War is nothing but a heartbreaker. War has just one friend. It's the Undertaker. Now think about that. That's true. Those words were very appropriate back in 1969. He wrote that song in protest of the Vietnam War. Things were heating up in Vietnam at that time in 69. But those words are powerful. Now, it's not only talking about war among nations. You see, we can pray for resolution to the war in Ukraine and in Russia. But that's sometimes all we can do, not to say that isn't a lot. But we cannot, as individuals here in our pews, in our community, make policy change. What are we in control of? We're in control of our families. How many families are at war right now tonight? If you're sitting there saying to yourself, yeah, I have a family at war. Hopefully that's not the case. But I've had many conversations with many people and many families, and there's a whole lot of families that are divided. When they get together for the holidays or just get together, there's yelling, screaming, fighting, bickering, just swearing. All kind of things are going on. So if you say to yourself, well, that's, Father Ken, I hate to say it, but you're describing my family, then this gospel reading tonight is for you. Now, the gospel comes out of the 21st chapter of Luke, verses 5 to 19. But we're going to look at a couple sections that are extremely powerful. It's going to turn out to be that if you have a family, a pocket of friends, when you get together, there's inevitably trouble. You might even have some family members that you're just hoping they don't show up. Because when they do, there's trouble. You just know it's coming. Let's take a look at verse 9, 21 chapter of Luke. Jesus says, when you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified. For such things must happen first, but it will not immediately be the end. Now, a lot of people like to think when they look at that verse 9, 21st chapter of Luke, that that's a reference to the end of the world. Because a lot of people say, when you look at the world itself, so many countries are fighting, and so many countries have these incredible, powerful weapons that if someone presses a button, they can destroy everything right in front of us. So that must be a reference to the end of the world. I've had people say to me, but Father, I'll tell you what, in my lifetime, I've never seen it this bad. Now, that would be true in your lifetime. So if you're 50 years old, 65 years old, 70, 40 years old, you might say, I've never seen in my lifetime this type of hatred and fighting and disunity. I've never seen it before in my lifetime. Well, that doesn't mean that your lifetime is a summation of history. Because there's thousands and thousands of years of history. Your lifetime might only be 70 years out of 5,000 years of human civilization. You know what's absolutely amazing is this. Archaeologists, not necessarily anthropologists, but archaeologists, when they are unearthing ancient civilizations, they find implements of tools, but the tools they find in these early civilizations, they find implements of war. It's amazing how in ancient civilizations, one of the first tools those ancient civilizations created were ways to kill each other. So war and insurrection and fighting and hatred, it has been going on absolutely forever. So then you say to yourself, well, the world's not going to end because this stuff's been going on a long time. How do you end it? Where do you find the peace? How do we find world peace? Now, world peace might be quite a challenge. But I think what we have to do before we try to figure out how to ascertain world peace, we got to say to ourselves, how do I find peace in my family? Because that's just a smaller group of people. And I have more control over my family than I have influencing the leaders of Russia and Ukraine. I can't affect policy over there. I don't know anyone. But how can I affect policy in my own family? What does it take to generate peace in my family? And the answer to that question is going to be in verse 15. This is an essential verse, especially if this kind of stuff happens in your family. Verse 15, 21st chapter of Luke. Now these are words being spoken by Jesus. For he says this, for I myself shall give you wisdom in speaking that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist or refute. Now that's powerful. All your adversaries, all those people you're fighting and feuding with right now, I'm going to give you the words of wisdom to speak. They'll not be able to resist or refute. They'll be powerless. Well, what are those words, Jesus? Tell me what the words are. Let me know what the words are that my adversaries, which there aren't many in my life, but there are a few. And if I say these words, they're going to be powerless, resist, or refute. What are the words? Well, it turns out to be that the words that Jesus Christ is speaking about here, they're not necessarily words that come from your mouth. They're words of action. Because action always speaks louder than words. Well, Christ, what is the action? What are you talking about? The action. Well, we can discover peace and solace and comfort. It's right there in the cross. Take a look at that cross. When you look at the cross, words and actions speak louder than words. When you look at the cross, what is the words that the cross speaks? Jesus Christ hangs on a cross because he says to all of us, love one another as I have loved you. Well, how do you love us, Jesus? Well, right there's the answer. I hung on a cross for the sins of my people. Remember this, and this is going to be a powerful key word. When Jesus is hanging on the cross, he's making way along Mount Calvary up to the top of the mountain. And people are jeering at him, scoffing at him. One soldier hits his side with a lance. He's being whipped and tortured. But when Christ would finally close his eyes in death, does he close his eyes and die with animosity in his heart? Does he die with hatred in his heart? Does he die with the inability to forgive in his heart? And the answer to all those little questions is no. How do we know that? Because the scripture says as Christ is hanging on the cross, and just before he dies, what does he say? He said, Father. He's talking to God his Father. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They are ignorant. They know what they do. They have no idea what they're doing. But Father, forgive them. You see, those are the powerful words. How do I find family peace if you don't have it in your family? If you say to yourself, oh, the holidays, they're just a lot of, not that they're a lot of work, because the work part is fun, but the holidays, you can pick your friends, but not your relatives. Half of them aren't going to show up. Half of them can't even stand us. Half of them I don't see. I don't even know. We don't talk. Why? Because there was a feud and we separated. Well, how does that end? And Jesus shows us right there. I myself shall give you wisdom in speaking, that all your adversaries are power to resist or refute. You have to die to self. You see, that's painful. That's powerful. That is very, very difficult. That is challenging. And the key component is, Father, forgive them, for they know what they do, is to forgive them. I was reading in my magazine, Psychology Today, which I quote this magazine all the time because it's just a great magazine. And in this magazine, they had an article, it was on the front cover. It was the first thing I read that particular month. And the article said, we've discovered the most unhappiest person in the world. I thought to myself, that's a really interesting title. There are 2 billion people in this world. And they have discovered the unhappiest person in the world. Now, that to me seems like a whole lot of research. It seems like it was 2 billion people, and you found the unhappiest person in the world. That must have took thousands and thousands of staff people to help you figure that one out. So I went, when I had the time, and I went to that article first. And I said to myself, what I'm going to do, and it was difficult, but I'm going to share the article with all of you. Now, don't look at your watch and get worried. But I'm going to share the article with all of you because I memorized. It took some time, but I won't know if I pulled this off until I begin to tell you the article. But I memorized the article. The title was, we have discovered the unhappiest person in the world. And then the article said this. They walked up to a person one day and said to this person, forgive. And the person responded, never. Concluding, that's the unhappiest person in the world. That's the entire article. So it didn't take a whole lot of work to memorize it. But listen to those, listen to that. That's powerful. The unhappiest person in the world was a person that was asked, forgive, and they responded, never. You see, when you can't forgive, and you might say, well, if you know what this person did to me, Father, you wouldn't be able to forgive them either. Well, that's a challenge. But I don't know what they did to you, especially if you're saying, I can't forgive them. But does it equal the words that Jesus spoke when he hung upon the cross? Does what someone did to you equal that infraction? Well, apparently it doesn't, because you're sitting there listening to me right now. So whatever they did to you, despite the fact that cutting you in half was painful, was difficult, and you can't forgive, it doesn't equal that. Jesus says, just follow my actions, just follow my words. When you say, I'll never forgive, you will be the unhappiest person in the world. And you're probably going to be joined by others. When you think about family division and hatred and yelling and bickering and making sure that I don't invite my son because he's going to bring his wife, and I don't invite my sister, she's going to bring her husband, and I can't invite this one because they're going to bring that one. I can't invite this one, they're going to bring that one. And then when you sit at the dining room table, you have 2 plates. Maybe the other guy doesn't show up either. Maybe they're not the problem, maybe you are. Maybe the problem is the gift of forgiveness. That's really powerful. Those lyrics that Edwin Starr, I'll just leave you with those because a lot of that to ruminate in your head. The lyrics are really powerful. I mean, when you watch national war, Ukraine, Russia, potentially China to Taiwan, maybe United States involvement, last thing we want to do, but we might. When you listen and read of all the wars we've had, and maybe many men and women we have in church tonight who served our military, which we thank them as we celebrate Veterans Day yesterday. But when you think of all those wars that we've fought in this country, all those people who lost their lives in war, what positive really comes out of that sometimes? I'll leave you with these words. I think it's really the essence of tonight's gospel. It's the essence of the cross. It's what Jesus Christ tries to teach us all the time. So the lyrics to that great song, War, is this. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. War is a heartbreaker. War has just one friend, and that's the undertaker.